Another part of Cold War history revolves around what the United States did to itself as a result of the fear of communism and the spread of Soviet propaganda and the so-called Red Menace throughout the United States and the world. The United States was convinced that the Soviet Union was trying to take over the world and establish a socialist economy, which would redistribute the wealth so equally that we would have a classless society based on communism. This philosophy was the exact opposite of everything that capitalism stood for. And so there was this fear that the rich were going to become poorer and the poor were going to take everything from the rich, and then a classless society would develop where nobody had any freedom. This fear comes about with the origins of this modern idea of communism that begins with the writings of Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. Their first writing was known as the Communist Manifesto. This manifesto outlines the reasons why workers were becoming exploited under the capitalist system and why workers needed to syndicalize or unionize in order to increase their bargaining power with their employers. Marx came up with this idea of the proletariat, the working class, and the bourgeoisie, the elite owners, being in conflict with each other. Marx said that all history heretofore has been that of class conflict. So we've always had the rich and the poor fighting with each other over resources, who has the power, who should have the power, and these types of questions. So the fear of communism leads to what's called the Red Scare in the United States. There was actually two Red Scares, one after World War I and one right after World War II. The main brunt of the conflict between the Soviet Union and the United States is two economic systems, the capitalist United States and the socialist communist Soviet Union. They have some differences, and they're notable. First of all, capitalism means that everybody gets to own their own property, their own capital. Capital is any value involved in investment and production of goods. In socialism, we don't have that. In socialism, the state gets to own everything, and they decide who works and where it goes where, and they run the economy through the government. So it's known as a planned economy. Capitalism is a free economy. Nothing is planned, theoretically. Capitalism was a success, many people would argue. It was an incredible success, so much so that the United States is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. I think we have a per capita GDP now of over $50,000, somewhere around there, high 40s, early lower $50,000 range. And the Soviet Union obviously is no longer. Russia's way of life is not as good as the United States because of Soviet communism. China is the largest communist country now, or still claims to be communist. Their GDP per capita is much lower than the United States, although their economy is now bigger. So other countries found the differences and similarities with the United States economy and either flourished or were actually hurt by capitalism. For example, Western Europe, Germany, France, Norway, they turned to social capitalistic economies, social democracies after World War II. So they said everybody can own their own businesses, everybody can make money as long as they pay taxes to the state, and the state uses those assets to give back to the people free healthcare, free education, which helps to level the playing field and redistribute wealth. Most of our democracies in the world are social democracies. They also offer free healthcare and many times free education to their people. Even though the United States is the richest country in the world, we don't do that, but other Western democracies do. And in large part because we fear socialism. A lot of leaders, conservatives in our country fear socialism. The owners of healthcare and the people invested in healthcare companies obviously are going to fear being taken over by a socialist state. So that makes us very much different than Western Europe and even economies like Japan, where they have free healthcare, and even people who are not Japanese citizens can get very cheap healthcare, if not free services in Japan. Now, why is this? Because they don't have to pay for a military. Most of these countries have very small militaries because the United States has protected them under NATO and other, United Nations, other organizations, CETO, the Southern Eastern Asian Treaty Organization, the Latin American Treaty Organization, etc., the United States became dominant. There was no need for military spending by these countries, and so they spent it on better things. There's another differences between capitalism and socialism is this idea that if you work hard enough, you can be a success in a capitalist country. That's the American dream. Is you can come here, you work harder than your opponents, and then you can take over a market, you can control a market because you simply are just more intelligent and work harder. And then the idea of supply and demand, the amount you charge for a good and the amount you have of a good allows you to control the market as well. This is also known as the free market. So the government doesn't get involved in setting prices or setting production or subsidies, quotas, although we do. Theoretically, we have a free market, no restrictions, that allows our economy to grow faster than socialist planned economies. According to socialism, the capitalist model is flawed because it just makes the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and it destroys the middle class. But according to capitalism, socialism and communism is flawed because it provides no incentive for success. If I am born in the Soviet Union and they say that I'm going to be a custodian, then that's what I get to be for the rest of my life. And if that's what I'm going to be for the rest of my life, where is my incentive to be a really good custodian if I'm going to get paid the same as everybody else? So capitalism, free market, spurs competition, spurs prosperity, according to some. Communism is flawed. It's a controlled economy where there's no freedom for the worker. They get stuck in a job that they don't like. They can't get out of it. So those are the kind of the criticisms and the acknowledgments of both of those systems. Karl Marx had a really one of his most famous quotes. It's the last sentence of the Communist Manifesto, and he says, "Workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains." And that was by Karl Marx, and I call him good old Uncle Karl. And what he was saying there is that if we unionize, if workers form unions and syndicalize and exploit their labor value through protests, through strikes, through other models of protest, then wealth will be redistributed to them. They will become wealthier. They will have better lives. They will have better jobs that pay more. And it's true. In many ways, this is true. As labor unions were created and protested against capitalist countries and societies, the workers enjoyed going from working 6-7 days a week, 14-hour days, to finally working a 40-hour week, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, time and a half after 8 hours. Healthcare, workers' compensation insurance, unemployment, Social Security. All of these things were benefits as a result of workers organizing and protesting against the capitalist system that was exploiting them and leaving them out of the American dream. Now, here's a little cartoon here. It says, "I love my new job. I will never cause problems." 3 days later, "Workers of the world, unite. You've nothing to lose but your chains." Suggesting that when you get into the workplace and you find out you're being exploited, you're probably going to turn into an Uncle Karl. Now, the antithesis of Uncle Karl was Adam Smith, and he was the first one to write about capitalism and the growth of the capitalist economy and the good and bad with capitalism. Conservatives tend to revere Adam Smith as this man who defended capitalism. Without a doubt, everything was good about it. But if you actually read The Wealth of Nations, which was published in 1796, and it outlines his description of capitalism, he did actually criticize certain segments of the economy and noted that these segments of the economy should not be capitalized or part of the free market. So, for example, like, roads, fire stations, the police. There might be certain parts of the country where we can't afford to build a road through, let's say, South Carolina. They don't have enough money. So the federal government would step in, help to build that road. That's socialism. So Adam Smith is saying that capitalism is good, but socialism is also good in certain areas of the economy. Adam Smith, for the most part, though, believed in what's called the invisible hand, supply and demand. Another way of talking about the invisible hand, what guides the economy, is greed. And here's a quote from him up here that kind of describes that. "It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest." Adam Smith. And we're going to go ahead and try to pause there today. And we will get back tomorrow. Another part of Cold War history has to do with